Good afternoon to everyone. I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar being hosted, as mentioned, by TIBCO and Sage IT. Our topic for today is the journey to data-driven, how data virtualization overcomes the data silo challenge. We have two distinguished panelists today guiding us through this discussion. Next slide, please. We have Manish Minaretta from Sage IT, and from TIBCO we have Bob Eve. Manish and Bob, please briefly introduce yourselves and share just a bit of your background as it relates to our discussion today.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. This is Manish Mendirata from Sage IT. Been in managing around data applications for over a decade and a half, and currently heading the digital modernization practice for Sage IT. And it would be an honor for sharing the piece of information and the best practices that we are aware and then we have helped our customers with on data virtualization, and look forward for the questions and learnings for you. Over to you, Bob.
Oh, thanks, Manish. Hello, I'm Bob Eve. I'm a senior data management strategist at TIBCO, which really means I work with the global 2,000 companies on how to maximize the business value of data. So how to use data to drive revenue and optimization of their business, new product introduction, et cetera. And the reason I probably on this call today to talk about data virtualization is I co-authored the first book about that subject, and those attending today will be able to get a soft copy of the book as follow-on. So let's get started.
Thank you. So let's go to the next slide. There we are. As you can see from our agenda for today's webinar, following the introductions we've just had, we have structured the discussion into three segments. The first one, today's evolving data landscape. We're looking for challenges we all face with the expanding amount of and diversity of data in business. The second segment is data virtualization. What is it? How can it be used? Here we look at the technology as a solution and how it has performed in actual use cases. And then the third segment is the framework for data virtualization success. This is not just an academic discussion about technology, but how it can be used in your environment to solve your problems, meet your needs, and the next steps towards success. We will conclude things with an open Q&A, as mentioned by Shay, welcoming your questions regarding data virtualization, and more importantly, how it can be used to overcome the data silo challenge. With that, let's get started. Manish, please lead the way.
Thank you so much, Michael, once again. And for everyone on this webinar, I would really like to thank and kind of take through my personal experience or personal journey of how it all started for me. Because one of the, having been involved in a data-driven ecosystem for a decade and a half, and having done data integration implementations for various Fortune 500 organizations, it was one of those things where we kind of felt that, yes, we've kind of nailed down all the best practices. We have adopted and understood all the fit for purpose patterns for various implementations. And now that we do believe that we can seamlessly solve data integration challenges for the given scenarios. Hence, when I was first introduced to the subject of data virtualization, I was like, what? Wait. That just doesn't seem real, right? Because it was just one of the resentments that as an expert or as an architect I had, which just took a little longer for me to overcome. And the only reason I share that experience with you over today is that if any one of you feel the same, I would love to kind of help you get over that hump, because trust me, I have been on that side of the fence, and I have firsthand experienced that challenge to come to this side. So with that, I would want to kind of go ahead and share what has evolved in recent years for where we are. So when you see this slide, it may not be any different than what we all have experienced in the past, that enterprises have always had source systems that have generated data. Obviously, I kind of call it as a simpler times, when there used to be a handful of systems. There used to be a handful of relational databases, some mainframe systems, some file system applications, and business only wanted data at some level of latency so that they could build simpler applications. They could actually do reporting and kind of manage a lot of data from their spreadsheets, right? And in that era, I should say, a lot of implementations were built using point-to-point integrations. And as the data integration continued to evolve, a lot of message bus, message-oriented architecture continued to evolve, which led to the enterprise service bus. But that was not the end of it. The things just started getting a little bit complicated. And we started seeing more and more systems, more and more variety of data coming in. Now we were moving from an era of relational data to some of it was unstructured. We had volumes of data continuing to increase, and we had a lot of data applications actually relying a lot more on APIs and not just data sourced from databases and file systems. So things were just getting a little more complicated. And at the same time, from a consumer standpoint, the business was also starting to rely on newer point of sales, newer applications or mobile applications. And that also led to service-oriented architecture being born out of the need of being more modular in enabling services to be catered to the business needs and integration challenges. But yet there was more to come, and that's what we call the digital times. And I think none of us on this call here or in this session today are not. We all have heard digital everywhere. You know, any term that you pick in terms of technology has a sound of digital to it. And look at how things have continued to evolve. Now we are talking about IOT data. We are talking about milliseconds, sub-second interval data latency. And that's not just a source challenge, but that's also a challenge from an integration standpoint, because many businesses currently rely on taking actions of that data, not just being reported, but also being produced as quickly as possible, so that they can tap into the untapped opportunities before. They can leverage the opportunities to either make more, to be able to generate more revenue, to be able to cross-sell more products, to be able to add more efficiencies, or to be able to even manage risk. They would want to be able to take informed decisions faster. And that has continued to make integration as a foundation of the enterprise, where it continues to have gone through the evolution. And that's where what you see when I focus on the integration layer here, it continues to have evolved. And we hear a lot about microservices architecture, real-time applications. There were so many industries and organizations which used to just rely on ETL, and all of them continue to try to move towards real streaming architectures, because they want data now and they want to act on that data now. So that is continuing to become a pain for which organizations are spending millions of dollars, effort, and time to get to that. And that's what we continue to see our customers having to embrace today. And just kind of also tying up to what the reports are getting generated, which are just mere facts, because we just want to kind of have a purview of how it's actually impacting the industry. And again, this is a survey from IDC in 2019 for data integration, where many organizations are actually adding 25 plus newer either source or target systems every month. Now imagine the velocity of data that needs to be transmitted through various sources to different targets. That level of data integration, that level of data to be managed and transmitted to different n number of applications is the pain today. And if we are not solving that, we are already on the verge of the outcomes that we see today. Business wants something tomorrow, or I should say yesterday, and we say unreasonable scope. A lot of IT teams are still struggling to meet the objectives that were laid out a quarter before. I would not say that every organization is there today, but that level of agility is continuing to create that level of support system that IT needs to provide to the business to support them. And it leads to months of implementation and obviously higher cost, because a lot of times that leads to the shortcuts being taken to meet the business goals and to meet the business objectives and serve them sooner and faster. But do we really need to take shortcuts? And that's what we would want to kind of continue to question ourselves. Again, the current problems today, as a summary, I should say, leads to a constant need of data. We are looking at newer and newer sources. We are looking at newer targets, and that need of data continues to grow rapidly. And the availability that the business wants today is now. If any source system produce any data, I would want access to that data now. I do not want it 15 minutes later or 1 hour later. And that level of data consumption and visibility to the business is one of the challenges what we feel many organizations have been going through. And working with various customers in the industry, that is one problem we hear day in and day out, that we also see that needs to get addressed and get solved. That begs the question that what's missing? Like, we all are aware of the pain. We all know that, yes, that's a problem. We acknowledge it. And yet a lot of us are unable to solve it. Why is that? So that is one question that we intend to answer for you today. And that's what's missing. And that's where we would want to introduce the subject of data virtualization for you. Over to you, Mike. Mike, I guess you're on mute. Michael?
Yes, you're correct. I was on mute because I needed to cough a little earlier, and I did not want to interrupt that great presentation. In addition, I want to thank you. You've well described the current problems regarding the magnitude and diversity of time-critical data that we all deal with in business today, and needing that information as quickly as possible. Before moving to our next topic, we'd like to turn to our audience to get their input on their data challenges via quick poll. What is your biggest data landscape challenge? Is it the exploding business demand for data? Is it the increasing complexity of your data landscape? Is it IT's inability to respond to new data needs quickly? Or is it all of the above? Shay, please provide us with the results as it completes. But this is a question, it's not just for what we as a presenter are doing, but looking to you as the audience, what you're seeing and what you feel. But in noting that data virtualization is a solution to such problems, we want to now turn our attention to the question, what is data virtualization? How can it be used to solve problems that Manish just described? And has this technology been demonstrated in actual use cases? Bob, can you help us in answering these questions?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And thanks, Manish, for kind of laying out the challenges. And it's interesting to see that in the audience that so many of the people are facing the same challenges. So let's jump into data virtualization. First of all, just answer the question, what is this thing? And if you think about it, there's a lot of ways that a lot of value that data virtualization provides. Is it access? Yes, it is, because as Manish talked about, there are so many new sources and places where the data comes from, and so many consumers with a lot of self-service tools, business applications just valuing data, and all through the business analysts, data scientists, etc. So really providing access to all these sources of data is one of the value props from data virtualization. But also federation, the ability to combine data sets. How do you, if you want to really understand your customer, you need a 360-degree view of that customer. You need to know what their service history is in ServiceNow, and what your sales activities are from Salesforce, and what shipments you've made from SAP, and what's their payment history from Oracle apps. So how do you pull all that together in order to provide that customer experience and success? That's a federation problem. Now, we all understand the way we in IT manage and store the data is not how business wants to consume it. They can't really deal with, if you're an SAP user, long concatenated German table names and 5-letter German acronyms for column names, customer name, customer number, customer ID, cust ID. What are these the same thing? What do they mean? It's really customer. Can we make that data more business friendly? Can we extract away IT's complexity? And then from a provisioning, how can the data engineers in IT provision data in a governed, secure, consistent way to the business? And that's really what data virtualization is all about. Next slide, please. What's under the covers? Well, we're really building a whole set of data services. Think of these as data Legos. Now, I don't have time to go through all the best practices for how to design, the enterprise data model and best way to manage sources and consumers and transformation techniques, and when it's best to use a catalog and when it's best to consume through API management and how to integrate master and reference data. There's a whole book of knowledge around this area, just like there is if you were designing a data warehouse. But the key ideas here are several. First of all, look at the title. One virtual place to go for the business to get consistent, secure, and governed data. So the data engineers are working hard to provide this virtual data layer. And you can also think of it as one virtual place to provision consistent, secure, governed data. So if you were on the IT side, the data engineering side, looking up to the consumers, you're really provisioning. So next slide, please. As you build these services, what you're really creating is a modern data architecture. Those of you who follow Gartner might have heard of a logical data warehouse, or Forrester and Gartner both talk about data fabrics. Old school BI folks on the call, the business objects and Cognos people might think of this as a semantic data layer. Personally, I like the term data as a service. And the reason I do is because the word service, on the previous slide, we saw basically a set of data services or views. So we're really building services. So that's the noun, service. But also the verb to serve. So it's really these IT data engineers serving the business with the data. So that's why I like what I like about it. Next slide, please. What are the benefits? If you think about this slide, the three on the left are the business benefits to the business. The three on the right are really the IT benefits. But in some, it's really how your organization will benefit. The first thing is, wouldn't it be great if we could just have business-friendly views of the data? So we could deliver that data in a business-relevant way instead of how it's stored in the physical schemas of IT. And wouldn't it be great if we had some consistent business definitions around things like customers so that we could do those 360-degree views and really understand, engage, delight customers with the systems and the insight that we could provide. Faster time to data. This isn't the traditional ETL, move the data to the warehouse, do those lifts and shifts and all the data engineering required. This is much more agile. We're building views, it's metadata. It's easy to create, easy to change. And so we get a much faster time to supporting the new requests. And The other thing is it is a more of a pull system on a real-time or near real-time basis. It's not the nightly batch runs. So we get the latest data to the business. Self-service data access. You know, we really can, through this data layer, this set of services, provision consistent data that the business just focuses on using it, not figuring out where to find it. As IDC has done some studies that say that business analysts spend, you know, over 25% of their time just looking for the data. And reduce IT costs, so less data engineering is a more agile approach. We're not copying data to the warehouse, to the staging mart areas, again, out to marts, so much less replication and storage. Through the data layer, we can put in a consistent set of rules about governance and security, and we can scale this up. Let's talk about the scale. Next slide, please. This is a set of capabilities, at least the ones that TIBCO provides, is really meeting some of the toughest data virtualization requirements in the biggest companies of the world. So really challenging demands, customer counts, you know, critical operations, et cetera. I'm going to talk about the use cases in a moment, but there's a couple of things to think about here. If we can meet their requirements, probably the odds are we can meet yours. And by the way, their requirements have been tough and it's caused the products to evolve. So all of those things that they've driven into the product in order to support their needs are now available to you. Next slide, please. When I think about the applications of data virtualization, I kind of think maybe from a line of business centric point of view, and then from an IT-centric point of view. Let's talk about line of business first. If you really think about the outcomes that businesses want to drive, a lot of times they fall into just a few simple areas. You know, how can we engage and delight our customers? Well, to do that, we need insight. We need to understand their data so that we can drive more effective sales to them, more cross-sell, upsell. And we can understand and provide better service to them. We can delight them. We can market more effectively to them if we understand them. So that's all based on data. So that's one of the outcomes that almost every company faces. How do we delight and engage our customers? Well, we try to provide them with a 360 of all of their customer data. Line of business operations. No matter what business you're in, you need to optimize how you do it. And therefore, you need that insight into what's really going on in your operations so you can optimize it. New product innovation. I mean, we're all hopeful in the biotech and pharma companies right now that are driving the innovation, that they have really good insight into what they're doing and what teams are working on what and what projects are succeeding and which ones aren't and how can we redeploy and optimize. So what if we had one place to go for all the R&D data? And then things like compliance and risk. That's also things that every company. So let me give you some examples of people doing these kinds of things, spanning their data silos, integrating, delivering the data sets they need in order to drive these better business outcomes. Next slide, please. This is one of the largest phone companies in the world. They're trying to provide a better customer experience. It takes 110 data sources to pull all that together. The account detail, the customer activity, the call center records, the call history record from all, you know, the information from all the cell towers around the, you know, their entire world. All of these different technologies. How do we pull this together to get a complete customer 360 so we can optimize their revenue and the service efficiency? We can give them great experiences, whether it's and they're online on their website or calling into the call center or when the driver drives up and is doing a repair at your house. So this is really what they're doing with data virtualization. Next slide, please. This one's more about the supply chain. I wrote about this one in my book. If you think about a supply chain, a global supply chain for a large electronics company, you have supplies around the world and you have demands around the world. And you really, in order to do supply chain optimization, you need to first understand what the supply is and what the demand is, and then you can feed it into a supply chain planning system, such as I2, in their case, to do that balancing and to make those recommendations. So really, they use TIBCO data virtualization to pull that data together from all the sources all the supplies, all the demands, and then drive a much more effective supply chain, which raises customer satisfaction, improves their inventory turns, etc. Third case. This is in the pharma, and one of the things TIBCO data virtualization is used in is about 9 of the top 10 pharmas in the world. And if you think about it now, they're really trying to drive innovation. So you need to understand, what you're working on. What's the what are the project managers need to understand so they can allocate resources. The researchers need to understand so they know what they're working on and can gain from the insight of others. And so they've built this company, we talked about logical data warehouse, et cetera. They call their thing OneSource, their data virtualization layer. And they gather data from across their R&D cycle and use it to really drive innovation, get products to market faster, don't overinvest in things that aren't paying off, pull a guy off of, or pull a researcher off of project A and put him on project B because that's going to have a better value and a better outcome for the business. So that gives you some examples. It's kind of a 360 view of R&D. Next slide. Switching gears to more the IT point of view. So from an IT point of view, you are in the business of supporting the business. And so one of the main use cases we see in IT is this modern data architecture, virtual data layer, logical data warehouse, data as a service, call it what you may. And this is really trying to provide that consistent one place to go across all the data, across all the growing number of silos, all the different consumers. Can we provide that in a consistent, complete, effective, governed way and a secure way? And that's the goal of that kind of use case. And I'll talk about that in an example. But it's really trying to provide one place to go for data. And oftentimes it's analytic data that people are most focused on. IT migration and consolidation. Hang on a moment. Go back, please. IT migration and consolidation. That's the idea of like if company A buys if you start to move data sets to the cloud, you don't want to impact the reports that consume data. So data virtualization oftentimes uses this insulation layer between the sources and the consumers so that as you start migrating consumers or start migrating sources, it's a lot easier. And then finally, the consolidation layer, which would be, if you're bringing two complete sets of data together. So now let's jump in. Major upstream oil company, also in the book, this is all their upstream data, 8 geographical regions. They call their data layer single source. 31 subject areas, 45 sources. SAP is just one. SAP Oil and Gas is just one of those sources. They've really focused in on getting a standard data model. It has now over 650 entities and 9,000 attributes, and a lot of just value in terms of completing new integration project faster, driving up data quality, get a lot of reuse. They've decommissioned a bunch of rogue data marts and optimize the query performance. Next, please. Another example, here's a large insurance company. They have the idea called data democracy. What if we provided all of our business people with all the data? Well, I mean, all the data with the exception of personally identifiable information, HIPAA controlled, et cetera. But fundamentally, what might the business be able to do if we provided that access, and what kind of insights and ideas could they realize? And that's been their strategy, and they've really been very successful at data enabling the business and opening up just a whole new way of thinking when it comes to arming their people to be smart about data. Finally, Pharma that the same Pharma. They had acquired one company, originally had acquired a company, and it took them about 4 years to integrate all the data. Once they had put this data virtualization layer in, OneSource, they were able to use those same models to the acquiring companies. They map everything to these models. And within a week, we were able to bind those sources and start to see, span the two data sets across the two companies and really see opportunities for synergies. So an amazing, amazing use case in terms of driving business value, totally funded by the M&A budget, by the way. So let me close out here. We've talked about a lot of different cases. Next slide, please. We've talked about a lot of different cases, and what are the common themes there? I've talked about business, I've talked about IT, talked about enablement, arming people with data, moving more quickly, more business friendly with the data, et cetera. Those are the capabilities, but the common themes really have been, it's a journey. For all these companies, it's a journey. They typically start with maybe a focus on projects and over time build towards that layered architecture, those enterprise scale data services, and whether you call it one source or single source or logical data warehouse. So what we've really seen is that you could kind of build along the way. It's not a big bang type implementation. So you get benefits along the way. The other thing is that since this is sort of a change management, adopting new technology, Manish started this by saying he had to adopt a different way of thinking. So it's nice if you have some help. And so what we've seen is, the most successful implementations, they get some expertise from a company like Sage to get started successfully. And then as they move along their journey, there's certain specialized expertise they might require. And so they bring that expertise in, when needed, just in time. And then if you start to move from a series of projects to an architecture, that's again, maybe a little different, a broader point of view, and maybe bring in the expertise from a more architecture and scale point of view. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that I've seen. Let me pass this on back to Michael and for the next section, please.
Well, thank you, Bob. Your description of data virtualization technology and, importantly, the demonstrated use of the technology in solving data challenges as identified by Manish in actual business use cases was extremely insightful. Let's have another quick poll of our attendees and hearing from them as to their views in the value that data virtualization may bring to them. We would like to ask the question, what would be the biggest benefit of data virtualization in your organization? Would it be getting more business value from your data? Would it be fulfilling new data requirements faster? Or reducing cost in data management? Shay, again, provide us the results as it completes.
It's interesting because, I'll be excited to see what people say. More business value, right? So top line. That's why a lot of times the customer cases are important because, they can kind of see top line. But the thing is, it's not an either or, everyone. You start to get more value from the data, you do it faster, and along the way, you actually save money in how you do it because of the more agile techniques and the agility that you get from a virtualized approach. So sorry for the trick question, but it's interesting to see that people see value across them all.
Absolutely. So that being said, as we stated earlier, our intent was not just to have an academic discussion about DV technology, but understanding how it can be used in your involvement to solve your problems and meet your needs. That's the most important and critical step in business. Manish, can you help us understand how to put this technology to use in meeting our attendees' actual business needs?
Absolutely, Michael. And thank you so much, Bob, for showing us a path of how it can be done or what can be done to alleviate the pain that was described earlier. And it could be just a matter of fact or something else. But while you were going through the case studies and exact scenarios that we've actually solved together as teams, I kind of just continue to realize how the times are changing. Yes, we all are in unprecedented times, but how those use cases still continue to be more and more relevant. Like, look at supply chain, look at the pharma industry, and so many industries that are continuing to go through evolution to get to that data faster, to be able to achieve and get that business value so that they can drive the future. It was amazing to see how those success stories or case studies kind of align to the needs of the user. And thank you so much for sharing those out. But as we all know that even with the right products, to get the maximum value out of a product, it needs to have a right direction. It needs to have a roadmap of a well-proven framework that has worked for various organizations. Because at Sage IT, what you would see is that we've built framework which has been proven over time with various implementations, with various iterations, and yet it can be tailored for your use cases, because we call this framework as an ABCD of data virtualization, because our foundation principles always go back to the questions of solving the business problem, answering the question of why for the business, for the customers. And that is where we believe that the assess phase and blueprint phase are generally the key that kind of help guide that specific need. And what we generally try to actually do during various use cases and various business challenges or business problems that are kind of shared with us, we kind of help understand what level of details and depth are needed so that the foundation is built on that solid platform that would continue to scale, that would continue to provide the flexibility so that can be built on top of. And as the poll said, that we would want to be able to get value for the business immediately, and even the access to the data faster, because those are the two immediate needs that you see eventually being asked either by the business or for the IT day in and day out. And how would that continue to get solved? And once we understand that need of through the assessment phases, we come through and build the blueprints for you, where we have shown what kind of patterns do actually fall that you need to follow, what kind of best practices you need to follow to adapt to that data virtualization strategy. Because again, we are in here to help you to maximize your investments, maximize the value from your data. And without the right blueprint, it'll be a little more and more challenging to do so. And that is where the construct phase kind of comes in. And remember, all this is happening in collaboration with your teams, because one of the success stories that we generally always advocate is that once this implementation has to happen, regardless you have the best products, regardless you have the best strategies, it has to come together as one team. You have to collaborate, let it be from a product standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, as well as from an implementation standpoint. So that collaboration is a glue to success here as well. So while these phases continue to propagate and continue to move to the next stage, there is a level of hands-on exercises happening in parallel, and the teams are getting more and more informed and educated on what are the best practices and what's the thought process and reasoning behind those kind of sequential steps that are happening. And then we kind of go through a deploy phase. And just like as many experts say in the industry, there's no shame in failing, but fail and fail fast and move on. There is a notion called build, measure, and learn. So you really want to build those feedback loops really faster. And that, in my opinion, is something that data virtualization provides, and this framework enhances, where you continue to go through a phase of repeated loops of constructs and deploy and reiterate on it as you continue to get more and more systems and more data requests that requires you to provide access to the business. Because remember, our objective always is to serve the business, to eliminate those silos for the business. And what framework would do justice to it if that cannot be met? So that construct and deploy loop that you see out here would continue to be really agile, to allow you to kind of pivot and add new phases to it. Moving on, it's not just about the framework, because I think one of the key ingredients that is success, that leads to success, is a successful team. The culture behind the implementation, the brains and all the team members behind it. So it's not just about adopting or preaching a framework. We also believe in getting our peers, getting our customers to the level where we would love for them to be able to take it forward from a certain stage. And that is one reason we also include optionally a 5-day comprehensive training program that we have kind of created based on various different trainings that we have helped our customers with. And again, this is not something that would be a curriculum that's preset, but this is something that's more customizable for your use cases, for your needs, so that you're learning to build and you're building to prove, you're building to help your business out. That is one asset which has continued to resonate and provide that feedback that it's not just a team of Sage IT experts building something, but it's a collaborated team that builds on it. And I think we all know that success breeds success, and we eventually want to ensure that until the customer team members, let it be business users, let it be IT users, are enabled and empowered to build it successfully, it would not reflect as a success for Sage IT as well. So those are the kind of thoughts that we have put in the framework to kind of help you out as well. And with that, I would kind of want to look at what kind of next steps that we generally follow for various customers, because eventually there has to be a series of actions that would take you to that level of implementation success and to provide value to the business. So feel free to discuss your use cases with us, because there's believe it or not, there is a possibility that we might have already seen that, or we might maybe in the process of solving that in the same industry for maybe a different customer. As you have seen from various use cases that Bob laid out, that there are many industries where this has proven to be successful. Banks, pharma, various industries that manufacturing that come to my mind. So there are so many different use cases and industries that have already been served, and many challenges being met, let it be for provisioning, data federation, validations, access. So we would love for you to kind of discuss your use cases, and we would want to then validate that, yes, does that validate and warrant for it to be implemented on a data virtualization solution? Because not every product is meant to solve every problem. We just need to be very cognizant of the fact that every specific problem can be solved with few key set of technologies. And if that is a right fit, we would want to kind of validate that with you. We would want to validate the capability, a technical capability, and a business viability of that use case. And that would start giving you an immediate feedback. And optionally, if we all would like to take it a step further, it leads to proof of value, where it kind of leads to proof of concepts and various success stories or use cases, which can be broken down into smaller subsets, for it to lead to a roadmap where it is self-evident for the value it provides and the ease of use that it kind of enables. That, coupled with the training, leads to the implementation success that we have continued to see. Because as Bob mentioned and as Michael also stated, having done that for various customers over the past few years, we have seen many challenges that we feel comfortable and confident in kind of helping you out with. So at any certain point in time, feel free to bring those out, and we would love to discuss them and create a winning strategy for you. With that, I would hand it over to Michael.
Well, thank you both, Manish and Bob, for sharing the valuable information that's based on your expertise and actual experience with DB in use. But their job's not done today. Let's open things up for some Q&A from some of our participants. In particular, I have already noted that there is one here that I think, Bob, you may have also responded to, but for the benefit of the audience, would you like to address that question that we have?
Yes. So the first question was, I've answered, hang on, let me get the question. Most of the time our source systems have a lot of quality issues, consumption from sources. Some have basic transformations, some have some more aggressive cleansing and complex transformations and aggregations. A lot are, is it a realistic scenario? Sometimes we cache, sometimes they need push data out, CDC, et cetera. But yes, as you can see from the landscape, the data integration landscape is complex, and the nature of any particular query, the degree of transformation, how wide or shallow the data set is. Are we looking at, you know, or is the analytic query all sales by region, by rep, by time period? Well, it's, oh man, I hope that someone's built that in those dimensions in a warehouse before you try to query that, for example, as opposed to, are we looking at, you know, the particular service and sales and payment records of one particular customer, you know, a wide, shallow query. So it really depends on the nature of the queries. What we recommend is a toolbox that you have to change data capture. Great, use that. ETL, great, use that. You probably have about 4 different ETL tools. So continue to use those where you need them, but then also consider data virtualization in the mix. I have a white paper called Best Practices to Achieve Your Performance SLAs, and it really kind of takes you through some of the capabilities the data virtualization provides and how to really think about these problem. There's also a decision tool that I worked on with Ted Friedman from Gartner and Claudia Imhoff to kind of help people decide what are use cases that best fit for data virtualization, or which ones are maybe you want to continue to use maybe a traditional ETL type approach. So not an easy, simple answer. I mean, I hate to answer something with it depends, but it really does depend. And I think, you know, part of the role of data engineering and a center of excellence is to pick the right tool for the right job.
Very good, Bob. Another related question, and I see it in the board here, is does TIBCO-DB have a built-in ETL tool? Or, as you said, if you already have ETL, then continue to use that?
Yeah, so for, you know, the real heavy-duty industrial-grade ETL, we recommend that you use, you know, one of the industrial-grade ETL solutions. And there's many of those. And so we don't have that. We have some light caching that we can do that's kind of we'll do a light transformation, et cetera. And those are kind of good for some of the, caching is good for a lot of things, but you can use it to do some writes that would be very similar to an extract, transform, and load. But if it's a heavy-duty, long-running, serialized set of transformations, we really would recommend using ETL, you know, specialized ETL tool for that.
Okay, very good. I see another question here, and this is a technical one. Again, I think this either would probably be to Bob. When can we expect an adapter for OSI Soft PI?
It's around the corner, actually. In the new release, it's within a month or so from now. We actually are adding the complete suite of streaming adapters that come with TIBCO data streams, and OSI Soft is one of those. There's about 89 other ones. So I think that's going to be a real adjunct to that more for those kinds of systems where OSI Soft is used. You know, those heavy volume capture systems.
And in the meantime, I would like to kind of also add a certain point on that particular topic. We have seen that we've seen various customers using time series databases and OSI Soft PI in specific. So there are options in the product for you to actually look at a custom jars to be integrated in your code, because knowing that how the source systems are also continuing to adapt, that extra help of custom built configurations allow you to import the native jars of your various source systems, because that is something with pretty close to my subject area as well, where we kind of created there is a py.jdbc.jar that you can import, and it'll allow you to start communicating with the time series databases and OSI Soft PI in specific for you to integrate and allow data to be accessed.
Very good. Well, I appreciate that, Manish. In particular, I was just noticing the next question actually is probably best directed to you. It was a question by the audience of, based on your past experience, can you share any few do's and don'ts while implementing DV initiatives?
Absolutely. Great question again. I think one of the things that we always try to get pretty excited about is cache. And trust me, there have been various scenarios where I've seen that customers out of the gate would want to cache everything. That's definitely not the most recommended option. Caching definitely provides you, it reduces the latency from some milliseconds to even much more higher latency, like lower latency, right? But that also adds additional dependencies that come with the platform. So using the right strategies on which kind of data to be cached and which shouldn't also is one of the design strategies that we have seen that has definitely required attention. And other similar do's and don'ts relate to around encryption and data access, because a lot of customers do not look to integrate their LDAPs, whereas TIBCO data virtualization can integrate with LDAP, and your IAM roles and policies can be best adopted to your implementation-wide levels. So there are various best practices, some on the caching side, some on security, encryption, and performance, because performance queries also can be parallelly processed, which also provides another feature and benefit. So there are many, and feel free to kind of write to me after this, and we would definitely love to share those kind of best practices in various specific areas around the same subject.
Okay. Well, thank you, Manish. Noting the time, we're getting close to our hour. I do have one more question here, and that is, again, probably from you, Manish, from an implementation standpoint, is how long are DV projects, or how are they phased?
So excellent question, because one of the things that we always want to say here is that it should not, if you have to still start building in more of non-agile fashion and take weeks and months, then it's just defeating the purpose. So TIBCO data virtualization environment and access to data could, we're talking about few days to weeks, you know, while when I say few days, you're looking at conceptually getting the environment stood up and getting your access and blueprint phases initiated. And once you have a good control and handle on those, the construct and deploy cycles generally tend to run for a few days at at most, and that loop continues to repeat for itself for the newer data needs and data solutions.
Very good.
Yeah, and I'd add to that you know, when you're building out an architecture, a full data layer, that's going to, you know, you build that over many years. But you could iterate and drive value immediately on the way. I talked about the one source at the insurance company in trying to do data democracy. They had that vision. The first year, they did 23 projects, different data, solving different business data problems, and you know, and then creating standardized services and support that going forward. So you know, it's definitely an agile, incremental, pay-as-you-go sort of model. I mean, pay-as-you-go, gain business value to fund the expansion along the way. So it's a pretty smart financial model.
Very good. Again, thank you, Manish. Thank you, Bob. I certainly appreciate, I think we've about out of time. So let me turn it over to Shay so she can wrap things up, because I know for those in attendance, I think we've also commented that we are going to offer a book. So Shay, why don't you pick it up here and carry things forward?
Absolutely. Thank you all. So like I said in the beginning, we'll be sending out this recording tomorrow. So please be on the lookout for that. But one great addition that Bob spoke about earlier is that we will be including a free copy of Bob's ebook, Data Virtualization, Going Beyond Traditional Data Integration to Achieve Business Agility. So now, before we all go, I just want to say thank you to Michael for joining us and moderating, and Bob and Manish for putting together this presentation and sharing with us all. We have such a great partner in Sage IT, so thank you for joining us in this presentation. And most of all, thank you to all of our attendees. We know that this is an interesting time, to say the least, so we really appreciate you spending this last hour with us and hope you all enjoyed. So thank you, everyone.